Welcome back to another episode of Chats with Dr. Ted. We've had a few episodes that's come out, and another one that came out for us today is the present moment. The present is a gift, but it's very hard to stay in the present moment at times. And we have here today with us Dr. Ted, who will help us understand a little bit more about what he in his career and his expertise and what we can take away from the present moment and mindfulness. Thank you, Dr. Ted, for being here with us today. Help us understand more.
A lot of people really feel that their mind is actually not under their control. Like thinkings, thought just come, whatever, response to what's happening around. And similarly, the feeling. And this feeling that you cannot control your thoughts and thinking is actually how we just behave in the habitual manner, even though those have not been productive or helpful for us, we still continue. So one thing about thinking is that actually thinking often are controlled by the brain. And the brain actually would develop somewhat differently as your thinking changes. Mm-hmm. This is what's called neuroplasticity. Before, we never thought that the brain is one organ that is set. And then as you get older, it just shrinks and then nothing new happens. Whereas we accept that other parts of our body, just like our skin, they change every day. You know that every month you have a new skin. You know that, right? Wow. So in fact, the brain actually does something similar. Not so fast as the skin, but they do change. And the way they change is dependent on how you use the brain. In London, for example, the cab driver, that's a very interesting research. You may or may not have heard that the cab driver have to have training to learn all these streets in London, which is a very old city, different from North America city like Toronto, where there are grids, In this old city, there are no grids. Okay, all the streets are like a spaghetti nails together.
Right.
And so to be able to be a cab driver really is very demanding. But after they know the street, after some experience with the street, they actually their brain, the area that develop is an area that is bigger than the training, which is the area that has this location function in locating these streets, Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting. So it shows us that actually if we learn to control our mind and thinking in certain ways, it actually physically would grow. And then it would function in that way even better. Mm-hmm. So it is useful to train the mind. That's one point. Mm-hmm. And then today I'm sharing the present moment because that's one very good way to train the mind. So I'll talk about the present because we have 3 time space in our mind, right?
Right.
We can have the present, we can like the now, we can have the future, we can have the past. So with the future, what we have is that a lot of cultures, particularly future oriented, they like to plan the future and want to control the future. But there's always a problem because future is by nature is unpredictable and uncontrollable. These are the 2 things that really bothers a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And particular people who tend to have certain personality, which is very particular, very demanding, and they would get so frustrated that future cannot go as they want. Now, all of us have different character and personality. So I'm not saying which one is good, which one is bad. But for people to be aware of their type of personality, they need to know that that affects the way they look at different things in life, including in this 3 time space.
Right.
They would want the future to be exactly so.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at the past, they would have that too. They would be so remorseful and regret things that hasn't gone the way they want. And that bugs them, even though that thing is past.
Right.
Because actually the future, there's nothing you can say 100% for sure about even the next day, right? And worse with the past, anything that happened just a second ago, you cannot change.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, to be able to fully appreciate that, that actually would make us look at future and past a bit differently, but also put more emphasis on the present. Day to day, our thinking on the present, there's also another research that shows that actually in the group that they study, they track their thinking throughout the day, they find that actually only 54% or so are on the present. Other types are the future or the past. So if with training, we can focus more on present, that actually would be better. And I'll explain why it is better. Well,
That's very interesting, because in the beginning, you highlighted a key point that we think as when we go about our day, the habits that we build, the life that we constructed, we feel like almost we have more control of what will happen next. Kind of setting those expectations of our future, setting those expectations of ourselves. And what you're saying here, that we can train the mind, just like cab drivers in London, to develop a part of our brain that can actually be new and helpful, rather, even instead of kind of accepting that or assuming that our brain doesn't change after a certain period or a certain age. This time space, recognizing this time space, recognizing, a future that we cannot be 100% sure about, but also recognizing that a past that we actually can't change anymore. These, appreciating this time and space helps us be more at peace in seeing, or rather, it helps us remove the clouds that's been clouding our present moment to see more of what's happening right here, right now.
in fact, focus on the future tends to lead to anxiety. And then focusing on the past in a negative way tend to lead to depression. So that is why it is a mental health issue that I'm addressing. But even day to day, I drive to work. Well, less often now that I work at home a bit, but otherwise I drive to work almost every day. And then on the highway, I got to think, if I focus on the future and about patients I have to see and everything, I would have a problem by not paying attention to the traffic around me.
Mm-hmm.
And the same about the past. If I think of things that I've done the last day, or maybe I made a mistake or something, that would not help to change that, but then that would also distract my mind from the present, which is most important to be able
Mm-hmm.
to drive on the highway, isn't it? So it is important to put the mind on the present when you drive, but it is also very helpful in other parts of the day, right?
And I think that's a very good imagery to have in mind, where we are individuals driving our own life, what happens next, or where we want to go, the destination we want to arrive at in our time with life. And just like your visualization of a highway, when we notice too much of the future and the past, it takes attention of what's really in front of us. What is something that we can take action on? What is something we can move forward with? And that hinders that experience. And it could, just like the highway moment, it could put us in danger.
Yeah. You just mentioned action, and I did say in another episode of that, another key concept that I put into this. because present is the only time that you can have real action. For the future, you can plan it, but the planning, of course, is an action now that you do. So I think future we need to plan, but the planning is something you do now. For the past, you might have done something wrong, but the current thing that you can have action is actually to correct it if possible. If you have offended somebody, maybe it's time for you to apologize to them now. So instead of just brooding over commiserating about the past, it is better to do something about it. In the future, is to do something that plan for it, but always knowing that it is not predictable, and then be ready to change when the next moment comes. So that actually reinforces my feeling that seizing on the present is really something we have to learn.
I've heard from you, Dr. Tegan, and we addressed this in our introduction. This idea of present moment, or this concept of present moment, and also mindfulness, came from a Buddhist monk that you look up to very much, Thich Nhat Hanh. Can you help us understand what you've taken away from his teachings and lessons?
Yeah, I'm not a Buddhist, but actually the mindfulness concept actually is in a lot of traditional cultures in their religion, not just Buddhism. But anyway, where it is expounded most and studied in depth is in Buddhism. I was not too aware of it, but then I went to a retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh when he visited Canada a few years back. And I started to pay attention to that, and that has actually benefited me a lot in my therapy, actually. So I like people to really look at that. I cannot replicate what he has done, so I would encourage people to look it up on YouTube or read his books. But I would like to comment on a few things of his application. So after I talk about that today, if that encourages you to read more and learn more, that would be my purpose, okay?
Sounds good. And we're looking forward to learn more. And like Dr. Ted, you said, we will be having a space where you can comment and let us know, viewers, if you are interested in more, if you are interested in their book, in Thich Nhat Hanh's books, feel free to let us know in the comments below. But for today, Dr. Ted, what would you like to highlight for us?
Yeah, the present moment is our topic, and that is one of the main teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh. The present moment actually is the very moment that we are right in at this moment. Are you aware of where you are? Are you aware of what you see around you? Not just the screen, but possibly other things around the screen. And your ears may pick up sounds that may be from this recording, but it may be from outside your window. And maybe there's even some distant sound, some closer sound you can hear. And your bodily sensation you may be aware of. You may have certain taste that you can taste in your mouth, and then there may be certain feelings in the way you sit, that the way you lean back at the chair. And then, of course, you are also aware of your breathing. You can focus on the breathing, knowing that there's something you breathe in and something you're breathing out. Something that you can be aware of. All these are methods to focus on the present moment. And with the present moment, so these are things through the meditation and the guidance, you can develop that. So I'm not doing that, but I just thought of sharing with you what usually the process is.
Yeah.
When you get to the present moment, you would get to also a mindful state. Because when you're aware of all these things, you're paying attention in a way to it, but in a very special way of paying attention. That is, you do not get attached to it. You do not judge it. You do not follow it. So if there's a sound of car passing by, you know it's car passing by, but you don't make a judgment saying, oh, that car is actually disturbing. In fact, just now my phone, there's a two ding ding. I don't know whether you heard. Now, I apologize for that, but I'm not gonna apologize too much because it has passed, really. So we don't have to mind it, okay? So in a way, the present moment, if you don't have to attach to all this, you are in what is called the mindful state. And in that state, actually, you could be so calm and peaceful that you appreciate that actually the present moment, like he said, is something get you a smile on your face when you get there.
Right.
And doing this, there are many ways that you do learn it, but I just share with you a few practical ways that I feel actually helps. If you eat the next meal, how many times you chew before you swallow? Now, you don't chew more than 3 times. What do you think? Unless it's a very tough piece of meat.
Actually, I am a very constant chewer. I do chew my food quite a lot and a slow eater. I might chew more than 3 times potentially.
Good for you. Because I tend to chew, actually, I usually eat very slow because I'm a slow eater by nature, but not when I went to the retreat. I think I had chew 30 times, okay?
Wow, 30 times.
So that is a practice, okay? And then another practice would be when you wash a dish, you just think of washing the dish. You don't think of what after washing the dish. You don't think of, why you wash the dish and not somebody else. You don't have any thought, you just wash the dish. That's a mindful practice too.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And deliberately doing that, he suggests that you can, when you drive, whenever you have to stop because of red light, you focus on your breathing. In and out, in and out. And you could do it at least 3 times, before the light will change.
Yeah.
And then you go back to driving.
But don't close your eyes while you're doing that, right?
You don't have to close your eyes because you need to see that the light changes and you have to move on. Okay? But the thing is, you can get to that state when you're good at it any time of the day. And actually, even when you suddenly get angry, you might still be able to take that 3 seconds. So that you have the chance to think over it, think through it, and then react in a more appropriate manner.
Right.
So in a way, I am just indicating certain ways that mindfulness can help. I'm not really giving a training in mindfulness, and other people can do it better than me. But if there is a request, I would do it here too. Some patients ask me to do it. And even in my session, a lot of times I don't have enough time to do it. Because I think you need to get into it, and that would take some time.
Absolutely. And Dr. Ted, you highlight I think a very I guess a summarized way of seeing how to put our bodies and mind into this present time space. We use our 5 senses, right? The smell, the sight, the hearing, the taste, and the touch. What our skin's touching, what our eyes are, what color our eyes are recognizing, because we don't take advantage of these 5 senses that we've been gifted to. And it sounds like these 5 senses are the key to what could help us get into this present moment, even if there's anger rising up, even if we're driving on the road, even when we're trying to go to bed. We can use these senses to bring us to a present moment instead of being pulled into worries of the future or being pulled back to our past, and to not let external things hold us back.
Yeah. So I just want to finish with referring again to what I mentioned about action,
Mm-hmm.
because that actually is where action counts, the present moment. When you get that calm state, then you would take action. So a lot of times people ask, why did that happen? Why this? Why am I depressed? All these whys. But actually, I find it much more productive to use the word how.
Mm.
So I asked them to change why into how, which is how. How could I get undepressed?
Mm-hmm.
For example, as I said, how, if you offended somebody, I feel bad, how do I deal with it, right? I can apologize, right? In the future, I'm worried about getting COVID, okay? How do I deal with it to reduce that risk? The how is the most important. The
Mm.
action is more important instead of the why. And the why can be in your head, turning like the monkey many, many times without benefiting you. So I think the two concepts about the action and about present are, to me, both sides of the same coin.
Right. And that is, I think of the phrase think before you speak or think before you do. And I think we don't do that every day. Everything's rapid, everything's automatic, impulsive even, and we don't take a second to, or even 5 seconds to think before the next action happens. So what you're saying, Dr. Ted, whatever we do, especially in a hustle and bustling city like Toronto or like Hong Kong, these big cities, we don't get that opportunity. But being in the present moment and then taking action by asking the word how can be actually helps us reach the goal that we've intended to, whether it's about the future or whether it's about the past. It makes a more concise and appropriate action to do so afterwards. So on this episode of Present Moment and Mindfulness, Dr. Ted, you've helped us see these realms of time and space, the future, which is unpredictable, which is we can't be 100% about. It weighs on our shoulders, as well as the past, the past happenings, the past mistakes really pulls us back into what's happening right here and right now, which is the most important moment where action can take place, where you can actually do something by asking yourself how. And Dr. Ted is one of the people who have founded this wonderful organization, Fook Mental Health Association. It is an association that serves Asian communities for 40 years. So that's 4 decades. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a thumbs up or comment below if you want to have more resources to the content that was shared today. If you are hoping to do an act of service for your community, you can always donate to Hong Fook Mental Health Foundation, and you'll find the link below in the description, as well as on our channel. Thank you, Dr. Ted, for being us here today to help us understand a little bit more about present moment, the actions we can take, the practicalities, and how we can bring us to that moment that we don't usually focus on. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in to this episode of Present Moment. We look forward to seeing what else you have in store for us, Dr. Ted.